Welcome back to the deep dive, everybody. Ready to scrub away the surface and get to the good stuff.
Always. What are we tackling today?
Well, today we're diving into a topic you might not expect.
Oh, do tell.
The surprisingly fascinating world of household chores.
Now, there's an area I know a thing or two about. Not sure I'd use the word fascinating, though.
Well, you might be surprised. We're actually going to be looking at an English language learning podcast episode you shared with me. Let's see. English learning podcast conversation, episode 14. Does that sound right?
Yes, that's the one. Episode 14. It's the one with Marco and Erica trying to get through their to-do list. You know, I always thought that was such a clever way to teach a language through something as relatable as housework.
It's brilliant. And as we go through this, I want our listeners to think about their own experiences with this, because I think we're going to find some really surprising connections between language, culture, maybe even a little bit of self-reflection along the way.
Sounds intriguing. Ready to dive in. Tell me, what was it that stood out to you in this episode?
Well, the episode uses a funny dialogue to teach vocabulary, right? Words like, let me see, chores, spotless, tidy up, on the surface, pretty basic stuff.
Oh, for sure. But that's where the deep dive comes in, right? I mean, those words, as simple as they might seem, they actually reflect some pretty deep cultural expectations. What one culture considers clean, another one might think is, completely the opposite.
It's so true. And, the episode even touches on that a bit when they point out some differences between American English and British English. I don't know if you've ever noticed how, for example, people in the UK will say shopping center instead of mall.
Oh, absolutely. Or how about Hoover instead of vacuum cleaner?
Oh.
It's so interesting how a brand name can become so ingrained in our language that we use it to replace the generic term entirely. It really makes you think, are there any examples like that in our own language? I bet there are tons. We just don't even realize it.
It's like how everyone calls tissues Kleenex, right? We don't even think about it. And for someone learning English as a second language, these little nuances can be so important. They could be the difference between sounding completely natural and maybe having a little bit of a cultural misunderstanding.
Exactly. It's those small details that can make all the difference.
And another thing this episode does, it highlights all these common phrases that we use in English. Things like, I'm in the middle of something, or I'll be there in a second. Expressions we use without even thinking. But for a language learner, these are so important. These are the things that help them sound fluent and natural.
I know. And I love how they wove those in so naturally. It really makes you realize how much we take those expressions for granted. Can you imagine trying to learn a new language and trying to pick up on all of those little things?
It's true. It's not just about the vocabulary. It's about getting that rhythm and flow of the language. Understanding those unspoken rules of conversation that really make it feel authentic. Right. And you know what else? This episode goes beyond just vocabulary and grammar. There's even a part where they discuss how gender roles are changing, all within the context of household chores, of course.
Yeah, and it's just so seamless how they bring it into the conversation.
Right.
They're talking about Marco, and it seems like he's the one doing most of the cleaning in this episode. And they even call him a house husband at one point.
I know. I thought that was kind of funny. I wonder if for someone who's listening to this to learn English, hearing that term, especially in this context, could spark some interesting conversations about, expectations around gender roles and things like that.
Oh, totally. Because it definitely challenges those traditional roles, right? Like, we often think of housework as,
right,
a woman's job, and here we have Marco, the house husband.
Right.
And I imagine that could be really thought-provoking for someone who's learning English, maybe in a culture where those lines are a little bit more blurred.
Yeah, or maybe where those lines are more strict, you know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely.
So it's interesting to think about.
Yeah, it really makes you realize how much our language reflects those bigger changes happening in society.
The whole day.
Like, it's not just about the words themselves, but it's about understanding how the world is changing and how those words reflect those changes.
Exactly. And you know what else I thought was funny? That part where everything kind of goes a little bit
Oh, yeah.
haywire.
Tell me about it.
Like, life decided to throw a wrench into their perfectly planned cleaning day.
Or a broken vacuum cleaner, I should say.
The vacuum cleaner explosion. I love that part.
Poor Marco.
I know, right? Poor Marco. It's like the cleaning mishap of the century.
It's almost too relatable, though, let's be honest.
And it's so true.
Like, even with the best intentions, things don't always go according to plan, right?
Never.
And sometimes all you can do is just laugh about it.
That is so true. I think we've all had those moments where we're trying to be helpful.
Yeah.
You know, maybe even impress somebody with our amazing cleaning abilities, and it just blows up in our faces.
It's a universal experience. Whether you're trying to master a new language or, navigate the ups and downs of everyday life. I think we've all had those moments where things just go hilariously wrong.
It's like the universe's way of keeping us humble.
Right.
Like, even in these everyday things, there are lessons to be learned.
Oh, yeah.
And there's always humor to be found, even in something like cleaning.
This episode does such a good job of showing that, too.
Right.
Like, they really blend that language learning with these relatable, funny moments. And it makes you realize these really interesting insights are hiding in plain sight.
Totally. And it doesn't have to be some big philosophical debate. It can be as simple as
a conversation about chores. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So as we're kind of wrapping up our deep dive into this really unique English lesson, what would you say are some of the key takeaways? Like, what makes this more than just a language lesson?
Well, I think it reminds us that language learning, it isn't just about, memorizing grammar rules and vocabulary.
Right.
It's so much more than that.
It's like that saying, we don't just speak a language, the language speaks us.
Yes, exactly. And this episode does such a great job of showing how even something like cleaning something that seems, kind of ordinary.
Yeah.
Can actually reveal so much about cultural differences, about the ways that, societies view things differently.
Yeah, and let's not forget the importance of humor.
Oh, absolutely not.
It's like they managed to make learning fun.
Yeah.
Which is so important, I think.
It makes such a difference. I mean, humor really does transcend languages, right? Like a well-timed joke can create a connection that goes beyond words.
Totally. So I guess for our listeners out there, whether they are, language nerds or cleaning enthusiasts or just people who enjoy a good laugh, what would you say is the one thing you hope they take away from this deep dive?
That's a good question. I think it's the power of observation. Even in those everyday things, those little moments like we were talking about with the chores, there were these hidden layers of meaning just waiting to be uncovered.
Oh, I love that.
So it's about really paying attention, asking questions, and being open to discovering something new, even in the most unexpected places.
That is such a great point to end on. So next time you're tackling that pile of laundry or listening to a podcast on a topic that you might think is,
ordinary.
Exactly. Just remember, there's always something more to discover. And that is all the time we have for today's deep dive. Until next time, happy cleaning, everybody.